Hello everyone, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the leisure and media chapter, which is chapter 13 in our textbook. It's kind of an interesting term, leisure. I don't think we hear about it too much anymore. There are many other terms that we could use for leisure: recreation, hobbies, activities, things we do together. But it's really trying to recognize these ideas around balancing our lives, that everybody has such a hectic life, a busy schedule. Even in this time of COVID, when we've all been kind of stuck at home, our lives tend to be a little bit busier than we'd expect them to be. But leisure activities are things that are supposed to be fun, things that we enjoy doing, things that sort of give us a break from work, from school, from other commitments that we might have. And it's something that many people don't always take into consideration when you're thinking about your schedule. And so sociologists really talk about some of the benefits to have this leisure activities, this sort of time off, things that you enjoy. We talked about this a little bit when we were talking about families and one of the functionalist components, thinking about families in society, had to do with recreation and sort of taking time to enjoy things in our lives, to take to enjoy hobbies together, to enjoy activities, to go places, to engage in these sorts of things. So talking about, leisure, these recreational activities, there's a lot we could discuss in terms of the differences in the social classes here. But there's really a huge benefit for people. There's a little bit more of a focus we see in society now on this sort of work life, school life balance. Particularly for people who are always sort of go and need to have kind of this time off. So huge sort of social benefits, personal benefits for people. And thinking about what kind of activities you engage in your spare time, in your free time, in your leisure time. Do these activities, are they easy to, are they accessible? Are they something you could do within your own room, your own house? Do you have to be outside? Does it cost money? There are social class implications that we could talk about in terms of what activities people enjoy. Does it cost money? Sometimes people will say, I like to go for a run at this particular park. I like to go play tennis, but even thinking about all the components of traveling to a park, of buying a tennis racket, of running shoes, of gas that it takes to get there, the cost or for some of these different activities. Sometimes people talk about golfing and the fees that go with that. People could talk about taking trips. People could talk about sort of more expensive hobbies that people engage in, and sometimes we can see some class designations for those and some differences in society. There's a term in your book that talks about kind of having a third place. That people have home, people have work, but this third place is more of maybe a place that you feel very comfortable. Maybe you feel safe. Maybe it's a place that you go to hang out with people for social events. Sometimes, a lot of our local coffee shops, Starbucks type of places have opened up and they have Wi-Fi there and they have places for people to work and meet and hang out. And sometimes people are very familiar with, the people that work in these coffee shops and they go there for a break. Sometimes it could be a bar, kind of the old Cheers, everybody knows your name place. But thinking about a third place, where do you go? What is a place that might be somewhere you go that you feel comfortable, that's sort of a home away from home? Maybe it's another friend's home. Maybe it's a particular area of the city you go to, or somewhere local to your home city or town. But thinking about that, when we think about leisure activities, we think about recreational activities. A lot of, things that I've mentioned tend to do with sort of physical activities and physical fitness. And that has certainly become a very big trend, certainly in the last, decade or so, even longer than that. But that people start to engage in these recreational activities with physical fitness. Maybe it's working out. Maybe your leisure time is going to a gym or taking some fitness class, something like that. We've also seen this sort of take over within the same last decade or two of media, particularly in social media, and that a lot of our spare time potentially can be spent on social media. And that has that sort of negative effect of potentially isolating us from other people. And we've talked about some of the effects of media, in particular social media. I know you're all thinking about social media as it relates to your social issue for your final paper, but thinking about how much time we spend on our phones, on our devices, and what sort of implications that has for, how we spend our spare time. Do you have some spare time and you end up sitting, laying in your bed and cruising through all the different social media platforms? Do you spend it with friends? Do you plan to go out? We're obviously hitting a time period that, in the spring and summer here in New England, that it's nicer to be outside and we have more options to be outside for longer periods of time. We are actually just seeing mask restrictions being lifted for outdoor activities at the end of this week. And so that will be a huge change for people as we go out and about more with our friends. We're also talking about, levels of vaccinations and having more connections with people. And life is starting to open back up to a certain extent for some people. So it'll be interesting to see what our shift is in terms of the activities that we can now more safely engage in coming towards the end of this pandemic. But thinking about sort of our internet usage, our media usage, and how much time we spend. I know many of our phones have apps that will tell us on a regular basis, how much time we've spent online or, within our device in a particular day, a particular week. It'll give us an average. That's important to pay attention to, thinking about how we spend our spare time and are we really getting what we want out of our spare time. So thinking about that, a little bit about the media, and we've talked a lot about media this semester, but the media, as your book is sort of looking at it, is traditionally kind of considered what's a fourth estate. It's supposed to be this sort of independent entity to serve as a check and balance, checks and balances, excuse me, really for our three branches of government, for our judicial, our legislative, components of our government that we've seen. And we've seen the media play out very differently in the last couple years. We've seen a lot of anger and animosity towards the media. We've seen different types of biased reportings at both ends. Sometimes it's very hard to find a more mainstream kind of news media outlet that is a little bit more neutral. It does become very polarized. It becomes very politicized. But the media is supposed to report on the facts. The media is supposed to give us information as it is happening. The media is supposed to inform us of what is going on. It always ends up going back to our government system. A lot of our social institutions, we see a lot of media in reporting on crimes in our criminal justice system. We're seeing a lot of reporting on the different sort of social issues that are going on with racism, with sexism, with people being targeted and profiled across society. So there's a lot of influence that we can see and a lot we can learn potentially, but we have to be really careful about where that information is coming from, and to do our homework, to do this sort of due diligence with our with whatever media that we are following. Social media is a whole different entity, and we are well aware of that. Sort of the influence of our culture, within our social media, who we're following, the trends we're following, the celebrities that we're following, the news outlets we might be following, the different types of bloggers maybe we're following, or different things that interest us on social media has a huge influence on our culture. Your book talks about a lot of terms: popular culture, high culture, taste cultures, and it really all has to do with these groupings of people that form in these online communities. Popular culture could be talking about the different types of things that are the influences that so many people get from a celebrity, and a celebrity endorsing something potentially could be a particular product, it could be a service, something that they are backing. There are some regulations within social media. If somebody's endorsing something or they're a paid endorser, they have to make sure that you are well aware that it's an advertisement, that they are doing this kind of as a paid endorser, which, may or may not influence how you feel about the product. High culture is something that is associated with cultural expression with sort of the elite or dominant classes, the upper social classes. Again, these could be influencers that we follow, celebrities that we're following, and if they buy a particular, use a particular brand of makeup, or, what kind of sneakers they're wearing or clothes they're wearing, what sort of trends we're following, sometimes we follow right along and buy what, if we can, buy what they are buying, so we can sort of be within that realm. Low culture tends to be more of the popular culture that has a larger appeal. This is following maybe like trendy TV shows, different music, some of the trends that you will see on social media. People engaging in different types of behaviors. Sometimes we see these viral videos of like the Tide Pod challenge or the cinnamon challenge, and those kind of very sadly ridiculous challenges that ended up causing harm to some people. That would be considered sort of low culture. It's kind of this particular following that people get that has this mass appeal, and it goes viral, and people start engaging in some of these behaviors. So something like that to pay attention to. There's this idea, and I think we see this quite a bit, of this magic bullet theory. Sometimes it's known as the hypodermic needle theory. And if we're familiar with the references to drugs, when you get an injection of something, sometimes some particular drug could be legal or illegal, but it has an immediate impact on you. It can make you sedated, it can make you sleepy, it can dull your pain, things like that. This magic bullet theory in relation to our media has to do with some content, something that we've seen on social media that sort of strikes a nerve with us, and it gets kind of shot into our systems, and it makes us respond immediately. And sometimes this is how we see videos go viral almost instantaneously, and we look at it and it either enrages us or excites us, or we feel something really strongly towards it, and we decide we're gonna repost it, we're gonna send it around, it's gonna become viral, and it spreads across the internet and these social media platforms. And it's this magic bullet theory. It's kind of this magic bullet, and we just respond so quickly, maybe sometimes without even thinking about it. And sometimes we see this very much along political lines, where we have particular feelings towards a political party or person, and we see something negative towards the other political party or another person representing that party, and we immediately go and repost something because it sort of follows along with what we think our beliefs are without actually investigating it. And we see a lot of misinformation out there. We saw a lot of this happening certainly last fall before the presidential election, even after the presidential election. And this is how misinformation can get out there, and it can really be very damaging to people. We saw a lot of the misinformation being spread around social media platforms having to do with the illegitimacy of the presidential election, when really across the board in many different courts, in many different checks and balances within our voting system and our people who are in charge of the voting systems across the board in many different states certified these results. They verified that there was not widespread fraud and cheating, as did many of our court systems. And so sometimes that information gets buried when there's so much out there that can be not necessarily accurate. And so that has obviously became a problem. We've seen different things in society happen because of issues like that. So the magic bullet theory can actually be pretty dangerous in terms of our reactions to things that we see online, our instantaneous reactions without actually doing our homework or paying attention to what is going on or investigating a particular claim. Our three main sort of sociological perspectives really talk about these leisure activities in media. Functionalists say that it's important to have these social dynamics occurring. It brings people together, creates social cohesion, brings our groups, these ideas around social integration, having people connected to something through these activities, whether it be in-person activities or online activities. Symbolic interactionists talk about the impact, the meanings of these activities, sometimes the meanings on social media, whether we are part of a particular group on social media, a particular following, whether it's a certain hashtag that we're sort of exploring, or whether it has to, having things in common with our friends and family and activities we engage in together. Again, there's some symbolism when we could see about things that people in maybe the upper class, middle class, lower class can engage in, what the cost is of things. So there's symbolism around all of those activities as well. Conflict theorists will go back to, again, sort of reinforcing those same ideas that social media sort of perpetuates these inequalities in society. It talks about the sort of the difference in affording different leisure activities. It could be expensive vacations, could be belonging to a country club and having a golf membership, things like that. Who has access to that, who can afford that and who doesn't. And so it perpetuates some of these systems. Is there some messaging and symbolism, whether you play at a fancy country club golf course, or whether you play at a public course, and you pay, as you go kind of thing. Is there symbolism in that? Does it matter if you love golf? Does it matter where you play? So things like that. And there are different sort of meanings in society and labels that we assess to those things. So conflict theorists would still be talking about some of the conflict that comes into play when we're talking about media and leisure activities. And that's pretty much all I wanted in a, very briefly in I guess my 15 minutes to share with you about this chapter. Obviously there's a lot more in the chapter, so I hope you have taken a peek at it. And there is the slideshow you can use for reference. All right, thank you.